Hello, colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you today about online student support. I'm Orman Simpson, and I've been working in student support for nearly 50 years. You can find some of my writings and presentations on my website, www.ormansimpson.com. So let's start by talking about learning and teaching online. There are two main ways of teaching online. One is just putting your course material online for students to read and learn, without anything else. This is how many massive online open courses, or MOOCs, actually work. Or you can put your course material online but add student support. The problem with MOOCs is that they have very low completion rates, often lower than 5%. Online courses with student support do much better, up to 50% or more. So, what is student support and how does it work? Let me start with the most important person in our system, that is our online student. Here's my picture of our online student. This is just meant to illustrate that online students need 3 different kinds of support. They need cognitive support, emotional support, and organizational support. And of course, I don't mean you to take this picture too seriously, of course. But I still find it a useful reminder that you have to work with distant students holistically, that is, as complete people. Because of the comparative isolation of distant students, you may well find that you need to support them not just cognitively by teaching, but to varying extents emotionally and organizationally as well. It's not just a question of teaching. So, what do I mean by cognitive, emotional, and organizational support? Well, organizational support is all about helping students organize their studies, managing their time, setting their priorities, organizing their job or family responsibilities, scheduling their work, and so on. Emotional support is all about feelings, about helping students to stay motivated, manage their study and exam stress, develop self-confidence, and so on. Cognitive support is all about teaching, explaining, assessing, giving feedback, and developing students' skills, and so on. So support can be divided into 2 basic categories: non-academic support and academic support. In my experience, it's often non-academic support that's most important in student success. This is because students drop out largely because of reduced motivation or the inability to organize their studies properly. If you can keep that motivation and organization switched on through student support, then students can overcome the most amazing obstacles. So, how do you do that? Well, support has one particular characteristic that's very important, and that's its direction. Support can be reactive. That is, you can wait for students to contact you. Or it can be proactive. That is, you taking the initiative to contact students without waiting for them to contact you first. This distinction is important, as we'll see in a moment. But first, let's look at reactive support. This is waiting for students to contact you. And there are three main ways you can offer reactive support to students. You can use a human advisor, either face-to-face or online using email, text messaging or by phone. This is a very high quality support, but it's expensive if you have to employ many skilled people to do it. So some institutions have experimented with artificial intelligence advisors. That's using complicated computer programs to answer similar simple student queries, leaving human beings to answer the more difficult questions. But this is still very experimental. But of course, the most common approach to reactive student support is to use a website to answer student queries. Although it's not easy to design a student support website that is easy to navigate and for students to find what they need. And indeed, there are many different designs of student support websites, and it's worth looking at as many as possible to find ones that might make good examples. But basically, I think a good support website should contain the following things. It should have an administration page to tell students what they need to do and when. Then it should have pages of frequently asked questions, the sort of things that students often need to ask. But for good support, it should also have some advice texts on common problems. Here are some examples of the kinds of texts that could be used for non-academic support, covering topics like catching up with studies when you've fallen behind, overcoming study stress, organizing study, overcoming failure, and many other topics. You'll note that I have suggested some texts which may seem unusual, such as on advising students how to get support from their families and friends. It's important to remember that support can come from outside the institution as well as in it. And I've also put in there something on helping students or supporting students when they fail. The kinds of texts you will have depend on your particular institution. I haven't got time here to describe them all, but you can find examples on my website, www.ormansimpson.com. And then there are examples of academic support texts, such as essay writing skills, literature researching, exam skills, and so on. Again, I haven't time to describe all of them, but again, you can find examples all over the internet. And of course, every online institution will have its own approach and write its own materials. And of course, you're not restricted to just texts on a website. One of the great advantages of a student support website is that you can use video materials, such as advisors talking, students talking, or students sharing good ideas with each other about how to study, and so on. You can find many examples on YouTube. But before I finish this talk, I want to return to a point I made before: the importance of proactive support. Remember that support can be reactive, waiting for students to contact you, but also proactive, taking the initiative to reach out to students. Some years ago, I was at a conference where Professor Anderson made a particular point. He said, student self-referral, that is, waiting for students to ask for help, does not work as a mode of promoting persistence. Students who need services the most refer themselves the least. Effective retention services take the initiative in outreach and timely interventions with those students. In other words, if you want your students to be successful, you shouldn't wait for them to contact you, because the students who need help the most are probably the least likely to make that contact. You need to take the initiative to contact them. There's a lot of evidence that proactive support actually works. This table records a number of studies from around the world that show the results of proactive student support. I've collected these over quite a few years, but you'll find many other studies out there as well. And this table is rather dense, so I won't go over it in detail. But what it says is that by using proactive student support, whether that's phone calls, emails, even letters, you can increase your students' success rates by up to 46% in some cases. But that leaves us with a couple of interesting questions about, for instance, who should make that contact? Who takes the initiative to proactively contact? You can use technology to make the contact with a regular program of calls, texts, and emails. That's easy and inexpensive. But I think the very best proactive support comes from a real live human being. And it should be the same human being every time, if possible. You know, if I was asked to say in one sentence how students learn best, I would say you learn best when you have someone who cares that you learn. And it's best if it's the same person all the time. Finally, how do you decide which to contact and when? You might not want to go to the trouble and expense of proactively contacting students who are doing well. And you would want to contact at the best date and time in a course. Well, the great thing here now is that you can use a new development in online learning. That's learning analytics. Learning analytics is all about using data. You first find appropriate data about student learning. You analyze that data statistically and visualize it in various ways. And then you can apply the results to improve student success by taking various forms of action. This is a very fast-growing field. The last time I looked, there were 320 million hits for learning analytics in higher education, and there'll probably be many more now. So, who to contact and when? Well, to contact, you can identify your most vulnerable students using one of the statistical methods of learning analytics. This is an example of how I used binomial regression analysis in the UK Open University to predict which students were most likely to fail using the results from students in previous years. We focused on our contact on all those students with a predicted less than 40% chance of success. To decide when to contact, you can use visual data from learning analytics in the form of a student progress dashboard. This is an example of student progress data visualized on a dashboard for a module that has 4 assignments. Green circles are completed and passed assignments. Red circles are completed but failed assignments, and open circles are uncompleted assignments. So you can see that student A has failed 2 assignments already, so has a very high risk of either failing or not submitting the last assignment. So they are very likely to fail the whole module unless somebody steps in and supports them. Student C has passed 3 assignments, but with rather low grades, so is at risk of failing overall. Student B, however, is doing pretty well, so we don't need to make contact with them. So we should intervene with students A and C to support them. But as I said before, employing a skilled human being is expensive. But that can be because very few universities really do proper, cost-effective analysis of student support and its cost benefits. If you do that, you can see that we can have a positive triangle. You invest money into support, which increases student success. Then more students will continue on course and they'll pay future fees, which of course you can then put back into more student support. When I costed my pre-course phone call project, we found that we had a return on investment of 450%. In other words, for every pound we put into the project, we got the equivalent of £4.5 back. So my advice to anyone who is interested in student support and student success: work out the costs and benefits of your proactive support, and you will find that it often pays for itself. I hope this short presentation has been helpful. You can find out more about my thoughts on student support from my book, Supporting Students for Success in Online and Distance Education, or from my website, www.ormondsimpson.com, where there is a lot of information that's all freely available. Thank you very much.